Hey everybody, welcome to Money's No Object. I'm your host, Dylan Howell. This is episode number 166 of our YouTube channel and podcast, and I could not be more excited to continue sharing with you guys personal finance topics that I think could be useful for you in your long-term financial journey. Today, we are going to be talking about bankruptcies and foreclosures, the impact that bankruptcies and foreclosures can have on your financial life, and how we can keep you out of these particularly negative financial events. And so we'll talk about all of that, and we'll really get into the details throughout today's episode. Before we get started though, if you could go down below, hit the big red subscribe button, like this video, leave me any feedback in the comments down below, and I'll be sure to respond to anything you leave down there. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify podcasts, then be sure to subscribe and leave me a review on either one of those platforms. Follow me on social media at MNO with Dylan, and that's really good supplemental materials to all the things I'm putting out in these long form episodes on YouTube and the podcast every single day. And then if you need somebody to keep you accountable to a financial plan, help you create a financial plan that is specific to you and your family's needs, and work with you on that over the long term, then I can do that. Then go to my website, www.mnowithdylan.com. Click on the Work with Dylan tab, and you can pick the financial coaching session type that would work best for you, and we can begin pushing towards your long-term financial goals together. So we know that bankruptcy and foreclosure are two big words that are thrown around quite a bit. And we all have these negative emotions around these different words. And many of us have these negative emotions without even understanding what bankruptcy or foreclosure are. And so let's just start out at a baseline today of understanding better what these different financial events are and why we don't want them to be a part of our financial life. So what is bankruptcy? Bankruptcy is a court proceeding where you tell a judge that you can't pay your debts. Right? You owe debts to different lenders and you cannot pay your debts. The judge and court, what they do, they issue a trustee to examine your assets and liabilities to decide whether to discharge those debts. If the court finds that you really have no means to pay back your debts, you can declare bankruptcy. And bankruptcy can stop a foreclosure on your home, repossession of your property, garnishment of your wages. It cancels many, but not all, of your debts. It does not clear student loans, which is a huge topic, right? The fact that bankruptcy doesn't clear student loans is one of the biggest gripes of student loan borrowers who have trouble paying their debts back. Then bankruptcy does not clear government debts like taxes, fines, or penalties. Bankruptcy also does not clear child support or alimony. You can't get out of those debts. And then bankruptcy does not clear expensive items purchased right before the bankruptcy filing, like cars, boats, or jewelry, obviously, because they don't want you to just get over on the bankruptcy by buying these expensive items and then immediately filing for bankruptcy. So when you file for bankruptcy, creditors have to stop any effort to collect money from you, at least temporarily. Most creditors can't write, call, or sue you after you filed. However, even if you declare bankruptcy, the courts can require you to pay back certain debts. Each bankruptcy case is unique, and only a court can decide the details of your bankruptcy proceedings. So we can see why bankruptcy is so negative. It basically just means, hey, I cannot pay my debts. I cannot even make the payments on my debts. I owe so much money and am not able to pay. And so you end up in this situation where you need some of your debts taken off of your back via bankruptcy. And this can really put you in a bad long-term position. We'll talk more about what that position will be as we move forward here. But that is what bankruptcy is. Now, what about foreclosure? What is a foreclosure? Well, a foreclosure, right, can happen if you stop making payments on your home, property, or timeshare, right? One missed payment probably won't put you in foreclosure, right? But it will likely, tell your lender, hey, you might need to pay attention to this person. But if you keep missing payment after payment, they'll start the legal process of taking back their property, because legally, the lender owns the property until you completely pay them back. Remember, if you're making payments, your home is still owned by that bank or mortgage lender, right? They can take it back. That's why it's so important to keep in contact with your lender if you think you'll be missing a payment, because you don't want your home to be taken away from you just because you couldn't make a payment based on certain situations. You can get some help from your lender, and there are options out there to help you to lower your payment or whatever you may need if you have some type of financial hardship that gets in the way of you making the payments that you want to make. And you can see here why a foreclosure is a bad thing and how it is interconnected with bankruptcy, because bankruptcy is not being able to pay on your debts, and foreclosure is not being able to pay on that specific debt of your home and getting your home taken away. And so these are very interconnected ideas, and obviously they are negative events that we do not want to occur in our financial lives. Now, how do we keep them from occurring in our financial lives? Well, that is the big question. And it's pretty straightforward, but it's not easy to practice, right? It's pretty straightforward how you cannot file for bankruptcy. It's pretty straightforward as to how you can keep the bank or the lender from foreclosing on your home, but it's not so clear as to how simple it is to do this. So in the simplest form, if you have no debt, there's nothing to file bankruptcy on, right? And if you have no mortgage, there's nothing to foreclose on, right? I've heard it said that 100% of the foreclosures happen on homes with a mortgage, right? Because if there is no mortgage, there's nothing to foreclose upon, right? If there is no credit card debt, if there is no personal loan, if there is no payday loan, if there is no car loan, then there is nothing to file bankruptcy on, right? And so with staying out of debt being such a large part of what I preach on this show day after day after day, you can see why, at least in part here, because staying out of debt can keep you out of these extremely negative financial events that could occur in your life only if you had debt, right? Only if you have so much debt outstanding where you cannot pay the payments on those debts, or you cannot make the payment on the specific debt of a mortgage. And so you can see that I build the financial action plan in a way that is set up to keep you out of either foreclosure or bankruptcy, right? And how do I do this? Well, one of the first things that I tell you to do is to budget, right? And to budget is to tell your money where to go. Well, in telling your money where to go, you can at least, at the very baseline, you can at least see if you have any deficiencies. You can at least see if you're not able to make certain payments and start making these arrangements in order to either sell the assets that you cannot make the payments on, or talk to the lenders that you cannot make the payments to and try to get some type of help. You can at least do that just by budgeting. Then once you budget, you move into this place where you begin to build up a small emergency fund, which can help you to stay out of further debt and stay out of a place where you may be forced into a bankruptcy type situation. You end up getting to the fourth part of the financial action plan where you are actually paying off all your consumer debt, right? And having a small buffer of a little 1 month emergency fund. And then obviously, having a budget that is telling your money where to go every month is allowing you to get these debts paid off. And obviously, if you get the debts paid off, then bankruptcy is out of the window. It no longer can be an issue in your life if you get through the fourth part of the financial action plan. And then, the fifth part is building up the emergency fund even more so we don't go back into debt ever, right? You get into that sixth part where you are investing at least 15% of your income. Then the seventh part where we are trying to pay off your home early, pay off your mortgage early. Well, that is going to help us stay out of foreclosure, right? It's going to help us to stay from ever being foreclosed upon. So once you get past the seventh part of the financial action plan, then it is impossible, if you have followed the plan perfectly, to ever file bankruptcy or to be foreclosed upon, because you no longer have those types of debt hanging around. And so as long as you don't go back into debt for any reason, then you don't ever have to worry about foreclosure or bankruptcy, which is exactly why I set up some of these parts of the financial action plan the way I do, because I don't ever want you to have to deal with the pain and the hurt and the issues that surround having to file for bankruptcy or having to be foreclosed upon. So let's talk a little bit more, just so you have a better understanding, a more detailed, nuanced understanding of what bankruptcy and foreclosure are. Let's get into the details a little bit, and we will start with bankruptcy and exactly what bankruptcy is, the types of bankruptcies, things like that. So let's start with those main types. There are really two main types for the individual, right? Obviously, companies can file for bankruptcy as well, and there are different types for them. But two main types for individuals, and they are Chapter 13 bankruptcy or Chapter 7 bankruptcy. You may have heard these terms before and may not have known what they meant. Well, you're going to learn, right? So Chapter 13 means that the court approves a plan for you to repay some or all of your debts over 3 to 5 years, right? You get to keep your assets. You get to keep the stuff that you already own, right? And you're given time to bring your mortgage up to date, right? If your mortgage isn't up to date, you agree to a monthly payment plan, and you must follow a strict budget monitored by the court. This kind of bankruptcy stays on your credit report for 7 years. So you can see there, a bankruptcy staying on your credit report for 7 years can impact your ability to do something like take out a mortgage in the future. It can impact your ability to work in certain industries, right? I know that a lot of individuals in the banking industry have to go through credit checks before they ever begin their work there, and that would not look good, quite obviously, right? So Chapter 13 is also known, right, as reorganization of our debts, right? Because we're still allowed to repay, right? We're still allowed to repay at least a portion of our debts to keep the things that we own. But what we have to do, we have to go through this bankruptcy process, which is going to hurt our credit. It's going to hold us to a very strict standard as to what we must be doing with our money month after month. But then once you get out of that 3 to 5 year process of doing so, then you have a couple more years that's on your credit report. Then you can really start to financially heal. But this is somewhere that you do not want to be. You do not want to be in bankruptcy or foreclosure, but you specifically don't want to be filing for bankruptcy, because ultimately bankruptcy is something that is a choice. Foreclosure is not a choice necessarily, right? Foreclosure is something that the lender does to you, right? They foreclose upon you because you did not pay them, right? Bankruptcy is not like foreclosure. Bankruptcy is something you file for. You choose to do. You chose to file for bankruptcy in order to get whatever type of relief you are looking for financially here. But again, in the vast majority of cases, it is not a good idea to file for bankruptcy. You want to try to work yourself out of your financial holes. But you just need to understand that something like Chapter 13 still leaves a lot of work for you to do. Then there is Chapter 7. And so what Chapter 7 is also known as is as liquidation, right? And to liquidate something is to sell it. And so Chapter 7 means that the court sells all of your assets. There are some exemptions to this, but they do so that you can pay back as much debt as possible. The remaining unpaid debt is erased, right? Because you don't have any other assets in order to pay for those unpaid debts, right? You could lose your home or the equity you've put into it and the car that you have in the process, depending on what court decides. You can only file Chapter 7 bankruptcy if the court decides your income is too low to pay back your debt, right? So a lot of people with lower incomes can file Chapter 7 a lot easier than people with moderate to higher incomes trying to file for bankruptcy. They will be forced likely into Chapter 13. And so we see here that having to liquidate our assets really leaves us with nothing. It literally does leave us with a clean slate. But again, this is going to stay on your credit report. This is not going to look good moving into the future. And it's going to be difficult to get your financial footing back under you if you have nothing to give, if you have no assets, if you have absolutely nothing, but at least you can start back with a clean slate. But again, Chapter 7, just like Chapter 13, is not something that I would suggest that people just jump into at the first sign of trouble. Try to work yourself out of your financial issues because there are consequences to bankruptcy. So what are the consequences? Well, bankruptcy, first of all, takes a huge emotional toll on you, right? Bankruptcy is difficult to get over. It's up there with divorce, right? Or death, or some type of major failure in your life. It is a major failure in your life. It's a financial failure in your life. And so it can be extremely emotional. It can be extremely intertwined to how you feel about yourself, how you feel about your situation, how you feel about moving forward in life. And so it can have an emotional toll on you. That is a big consequence. But there are some direct effects, right? Not emotional, but actually quantifiable effects that you can look at as well. So first off, your bankruptcy is public domain. This means your name and other personal information will appear in court records for the public to access. That's right. Potential employers, like I said earlier, banks, clients, and businesses, all of these individuals and entities can access the fact that you filed for bankruptcy. And so it can just kind of be a black mark on your life. It can be a black mark on what you have done in the past, and people may not trust you in certain industries or in certain situations, or they may not want to work with you because of the fact that they've seen that you have been irresponsible with your money in the past. Okay, so your bankruptcy becomes public domain. Filing bankruptcy is extremely expensive, right? So filing fees for Chapter 13 bankruptcy can cost about $310 plus attorney's fees, which can be anywhere from $1,500 to $6,000, which I said extremely expensive. Well, for somebody who doesn't have the money to pay for their debts, that is extremely expensive, right? That is extremely expensive if you don't have the money to pay for your debts. For Chapter 7 bankruptcy, you may shell out, a little over $300 for filing fees, and you'll pay anywhere from $800 to $4,000 for an attorney on average, right? And again, extremely costly if you don't have a high income, extremely costly if you are in this situation where you can't pay your debts and you're looking for a clean slate. It's costly to file bankruptcy, okay? So that's another effect and another consequence of filing bankruptcy. And then buying a home could be more complicated, right? Unless you pay cash for a home, which is extremely unlikely in most people's cases, right? It could take 1 to 4 years before you even qualify for a mortgage loan, regardless of how you clean up your financial life. Again, this is a black mark on your credit report that stays there for an extended period of time, and actually having to build up assets again in order to be able to put down a substantial down payment, if they'll even allow you to have a loan, is going to be difficult as well. And so these are some very legitimate things that get in the way when it comes to bankruptcy. It is extremely consequential. It's not something that just allows you to have a clean slate with no consequences. There are consequences, and you need to understand what those are. That's why I'm trying to make this clear to you in today's episode. Now, we've talked about bankruptcy, the types, the consequences, all these different types of things. Now let's talk a little bit about foreclosure. Okay, so how does a foreclosure work? Well, there are 3 types of foreclosure. There were 2 types of bankruptcies that we talked about, Chapter 13, Chapter 7, but there are also multiple types of foreclosures. Well, the first type of foreclosure, and again, this is all going to depend on your state, where you're at, your current situation, is a judicial foreclosure. This type of foreclosure goes through the court system, right? This is one of the most common types of foreclosure. Then there is a power of sale, a non-judicial foreclosure, where your lender can put the home up for auction without the oversight of the courts, without the oversight of the judicial system. And then there is a strict foreclosure, and this is where the property goes back to the lender after a court-ordered time period. In strict cases, the home is usually worth less than what is owed on it. So you are upside down on that home already, and so you have this strict foreclosure. So none of these are good, right? None of these are good. All of these meant that you could not pay your bills. You could not pay your payment on your mortgage. And so, again, none of these are good. Bankruptcy, none of the options are good. Foreclosure, none of the options are good, right? I just want you to be informed. I want you to understand what these different types are. That way, if you do get into a bad financial situation, you can understand what your options may be, right? But I want these to be worst case scenarios for you guys. I want you guys to stay away from bankruptcy, stay away from foreclosures, if at all possible. I know that there are tough situations where, things have to be done. And I get it, right? You have to make progress. You have to move forward in some way. But I want you to stay away from these particular things if at all possible. Okay. Now, everybody's circumstances are a little different when it comes to foreclosure, but foreclosures typically happen in a few stages, right? A few things occur, right, as you go through this foreclosure process. So first, you miss a few payments, right? So nobody who is purchasing a home wants to miss payments. You think you're going to be able to make your payments month after month, year after year, but a few missed mortgage payments could steer you in the direction of a foreclosure. That is going to be a red flag to your lender. Your lender is going to pay a little more attention to you. They're likely going to be sending you notices and things like that. Maybe not threatening foreclosure just yet, but they are going to be interested in what's going on because, hey, they want their money. And if they can't get their money, they're going to take their asset back, the home, right? So first you miss a few payments, then your lender will submit a notice of default. Default meaning you don't make your payments, right? That's all default. If you default on a loan, that means you don't make your payments on a loan. So when you're behind on your payments for at least, let's say, 3 to 6 months, that's pretty typical. Your lender will submit a notice of default to your county recorder's office. You won't be surprised when this happens. You'll know that you have missed multiple payments. They will have sent letters to you that are asking for payment, trying to get you to make a payment. And when they submit the notice of default, they'll send you a certified letter with the Form 2, right? This will start the foreclosure process, okay? You just have to remember that if you can make your payments at this point, you want to fess up because communication's key. You want to try to get something going with your lender to where you don't get foreclosed upon, but that is the next step. And then your home goes into the pre-foreclosure stage. Now that your lender or bank has submitted their notice of default to the county recorder, your property is now in what's called the pre-foreclosure stage. In this stage, you have about 3 months to get your mortgage back on track, and you have a few options, right? You can either catch up on your payments that you've missed. You can try to sell your home in a short sale, right? A short sale basically being that you're trying to sell something as fast as you can at a lower price in order to beat the foreclosure, right? You can sell your house in a short sale, or you can sign the home over to your lender with a deed in lieu of foreclosure. And this deed in lieu of foreclosure, this is you basically giving up the home, allowing your bank to forego the long and expensive process of a foreclosure. So basically knowing that you would foreclose otherwise and just giving the home up on the front end. So those are really your options when you get into this pre-foreclosure stage. Now, there are obviously more stages moving forward, right? If you don't get it taken care of in that pre-foreclosure stage, then your lender will take action and try to take your home to auction, right? Maybe your lender is a stick in the mud about the short sale, meaning they don't want you to sell it for less than it's worth. Maybe your home just wouldn't sell. Either way, the next step would be to take their property and auction it, right? Your lender will appoint a trustee to the property to take it to auction, right? This person will start the bid at the amount left on the balance of your mortgage, and the sale will go to the highest bid in the vast majority of cases, okay? So if you're still wondering if you can turn this foreclosure around at this point, you can. In some states, even if the property was sold at an auction, you as the homeowner have the right to try to purchase the home. But now you have to pay the balance and interest plus anything your bank spent going through the process. So it can be extremely costly. And if you're able to do this, then you're probably able in the pre-foreclosure stage to get your home back in the first place. And then lastly, the last part of all this is if your home does not sell, it becomes a real estate owned property. If the home does not sell, right, then it becomes the full responsibility of the bank or mortgage company. Yep, taxes and all. And at this point, the bank will be pretty excited to sell the property and get it off their hands. If you're still in the home, your lender will want you out extremely quickly. And then some lenders might offer you cash to leave or help you with your relocation. Either way, right, this is when it is time for you to be out. You will be out of that home. And then the foreclosure process is basically over. Now, how long does this stay on your credit report? We talked about how long the bankruptcy stays. How long does a foreclosure stay on your credit report? Well, foreclosures can tank your credit scores immediately. The actual foreclosure, along with the missed mortgage payments, can have a big impact on your credit score. In most cases, your credit report will reflect your foreclosure for 7 years from the date of the first missed loan payment, which is a long time, just like with the bankruptcy. A ton of time that you are having to make up for the fact that you made some bad financial decisions or you were not able to pay your debts. Again, right? Again. Staying out of debt will keep us from these places. Staying out of debt will keep us out of foreclosure. Staying out of debt will keep us out of filing bankruptcy. right? Now, let's say that we're going towards foreclosure or bankruptcy, okay? And we are trying to figure out how to stay out of those places, okay? What are a couple tips I can give you in order to stay out of foreclosure or bankruptcy? Well, first off, you need to be honest with yourself, and you need to see if it is a real possibility or it's something you're just making up in your mind. Because sometimes we get into tough financial situations and we immediately want to run to the idea of bankruptcy as something to wipe the slate clean. It's not that simple, and it's way more costly than you think it is. So don't run there far too quickly, right? You probably have more options than you think you have. So think it through first. But if you think it through and you're like, okay, I really don't see any other option, I need to start putting some things in place. Here's some things you can do to try to stay out of that place. If you have any IRAs, 401ks, any type of retirement account that does not allow you to have access to the money until you are, 55 or 59 and a half or whatever it is, right? The only time that I will allow you to get your hands on that money early, right? The only time that I think you should be pulling that money early, incurring the penalties on that money in order to do something, is to keep yourself out of bankruptcy or foreclosure, because these will have far bigger long-standing effects than just taking some money out in order to stay out of those places, right? So this is the only place where I say, hey, if you can get it taken care of with any money that you have, get it taken care of, get it over with, and then you can replenish your 401k, your IRAs, or whatever moving forward. But there's no way to replenish the fact that you filed for bankruptcy or you were foreclosed upon. So do that, put that money to work if at all possible. Now, if it's not going to clear up whatever's going on, then there's no reason to waste that money on doing that anyway. Okay. But obviously any money you can get your hands on, if you can, try to work some more in order to make up old missed payments, then try to do that. Get side hustles, do anything you can, sell things, right? Sell things that are getting in the way. Try to come up with as much cash as possible in order to keep yourself out of these bad situations. Don't just, bop along in the normalcy and think that that's going to be sufficient. It will not be sufficient. You will end up hurting and end up in bankruptcy or foreclosure. So you want to be selling things. You want to use any excess cash that you have. And then if, somebody is willing to loan you the money, if somebody is willing to gift you the money, if somebody is willing to help you out, not that you should just be going around asking for help, but don't deny any act of charity here, because this can be so detrimental to your long-term financial life. But you need to scratch and claw and do everything you can, work, get as much money in your hands as you can get, be on the phone with your lenders, trying to negotiate, trying to get yourself into a place where you are not going to be foreclosed on or going to have to file bankruptcy. Try to settle debts. Try any old debts that you may have that are dragging you down. Try to settle them for pennies on the dollar, right? Get out from under some of these debts so you can continue to move forward, right? There's a reason that I preach what I do. There's a reason that I preach getting out of debt. There's a reason that I don't tell you to stay in debt and, be investing the difference or, whatever, right? I'm not telling you to just stay in debt and invest, or stay in debt and do all these different things all at the same time. And I want you to get out of debt so you don't end up in one of these dangerous financial situations that will stick with you for a long period of time. Look, I don't want you to file for bankruptcy. I don't want you to be foreclosed upon. And the best way to stay out of those places is to put good financial habits in place in the first place, right? Build a good financial foundation. Follow a plan like the Financial Action Plan and get yourself to a position of long-term financial strength. And then you can push towards long-term financial freedom and success that is not possible if you are remaining in debt and remaining tied down to a particular situation that may force you into foreclosure or bankruptcy. So I hope this episode helped you to understand, at least on a baseline level, what foreclosure and what bankruptcy are, how they can be avoided, right? If you have to go into them, what the implications are, and what you can expect if this is a reality for you right now. So I hope it's not. I hope this is not something you're going into. But what we need to make sure that we can do is to fight as hard as we can to stay away from these things that are going to impact us heavily financially for a long period of time, and do everything that we can do to stay out of these places by getting out of debt, by having emergency funds, and doing the things financially in the first place that are going to build a strong foundation for our future. So thanks for watching this video. If you could go down below, hit the big red subscribe button, like this video, leave me any feedback in the comments down below, and I'll be sure to respond to anything you leave down there. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify podcast, then be sure to subscribe and leave me a review on either one of those platforms. Follow me on social media at MNO with Dylan, and that's really good supplemental materials to all the things I'm putting out in these long form episodes on YouTube and the podcast every single day. And then if you need somebody to help you to create a plan that is specific to you and your family's needs financially, then I can help you do that. Just go to my website, www.mnowithdylan.com. Click on the Work with Dylan tab, and you can choose the financial coaching session type that would work best for you, and we can begin pushing towards your long-term financial goals together. So tune in tomorrow as I talk about your debts and whether or not your debts are too much or you are spending too much on things that aren't allowing you to pay your debts off. So thanks for tuning into this episode of Money's No Object. I'm your host, Dylan Howell. God bless.